Hello, this is Andrew Urich. I'm a management professor at the Spears School of Business, and this is our Eastin Center podcast that we call What's Your Story? What we try to do is speak with people who have a story to share with our students, because students want to accomplish things. We try to give you the inside scoop on how to get it done. Today's guest is Leah Walsh. She's an OSU grad from 2016. She was a marketing major. She's from Flower Mound, Texas, and she graduated and got a job with ISN. And she's back here on campus today interviewing on behalf of ISN, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring her into the studio and explain exactly how you get a job at ISN. And I hope it's going to be very helpful because she goes through the whole process. And one of the most interesting things she points out is, although she's a marketing major, she sort of agrees to, doesn't matter what your major is, what ISN is looking for is people skills. And of course, at the Eastin Center, that's what we try to teach, people skills. So here's our conversation with Leah Walsh. Eastin Center podcast. Our conversation today is with Leah Walsh. She's from Flower Mound, Texas, and an OSU grad from 2016. And she got a great job at ISN down in Dallas. And for What's Your Story, we're going to have Leah tell us how she got the job at ISN, because we know a lot of OSU students are interested in doing the same thing. So we'll go through there. So first, Leah, do you want to tell us a little bit about ISN?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. So, truthfully, whenever I first started at ISN, I really didn't know what we did either. But to sum it up, we're a software-based company and help clients manage their contractors. So at the end of the day, we just want to ensure there's safety on the work site.
Okay, and you have about 500 people who work there?
500 employees, correct.
And a bunch of them are from OSU.
Yes.
And one of the founders is from OSU, and a lot of the early hires are from OSU, so they're up there in the organization.
Exactly, yep. The Eastin Center, Joe Eastin is our CEO. So he was the founder of the company and our president as well as from OSU.
Okay, great. So I think the ISN process is a little bit different than a lot of companies in the way that they go about recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
You want to tell us about some of those differences?
Yes, so it's definitely, we hire college students, fresh out of college graduates. And it's definitely a different interview process than I had experienced with any other company. Of course, just like, others, you may initially do your first interviews on campus. And then if you get to the second round interviews, that's where it gets unique. So we do essentially what's called speed date interviews, where you probably have 7 different interviews that are each 8 minutes long, and you all stand at the back of this room. They ring a bell, and you go find your table, sit down, have your 8-minute interview. They ring another bell, and then you start over.
Wow.
So they'll do some intense speed interviews and then presentations as well. That's a small portion where they'll give you a topic 5 minutes beforehand, and you've got that 5 minutes to prepare, and you have to go and present on it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So at the beginning you had did you do an internship or go straight there for the job?
I did not. I just went full-time position.
Okay. So you had a screening interview
Mm-hmm.
on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with one person, I imagine,
Mm-hmm.
for 15 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us, what was that like? And specifically, what do you think you did to get picked?
So I definitely did my research. Going in there, I wanted to make sure I was asking knowledgeable questions, right? But I didn't necessarily know what it was I wanted to do graduating college. I obviously knew the goal was to get a job. So I just put myself out there, and I saw ISN on the Hire OSU Grads website and just thought to apply, saw them at the career fair. And then I just went in there with confidence and ready to explain my experience and truthfully just...
Okay, so okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. So when you researched the company, how did you, if you remember, how did you research the company? What did you find that proved useful? Because I know we always tell students research the company, but I'm not sure they know exactly what they're looking for and how to show that they researched.
And the good news is that I don't think they expect you to have an immense amount of knowledge. So definitely know the basics. You don't want to walk in there and ask what it is they do. I just had the general idea. I mean, I didn't have a crazy amount of knowledge, but I just knew the basics of the job, the position I was going for. And then from there, just kind of applied my life experiences to what I knew from there. So it's a tough company to understand the business without being in the business to know it. So really just having the baseline knowledge and then being able to apply your experiences on top of that.
Okay, so because you were doing behavioral interview answers, so when you say you were using experiences from your life, that's another thing that we try to emphasize with the students, that you were lucky to have had experiences that you could call upon. Because in full disclosure, Leah was in my class today pitching to the students, and we had her stay after and talk to us. And I interrupted their presentation to say, so really what you're telling us is, it doesn't matter what you learned in college, what your major is, you're only looking for people skills.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
And most people don't want to admit that because it seems like all the money and time was for naught. But to be clear, you learn about yourself in those classes, you grow, you get those stories and experiences that turn you into who you are, and then you can recall in behavioral interview questions. And so you felt like you had experiences to fall back on to answer their behavioral interview questions. And did you rehearse behavioral interview questions or write out answers? Want to talk a little bit about what you did to prepare?
Yes. So I researched common questions that they'll ask during interviews and made sure I had answers prepared off the bat for probably 10, 15 behavioral type questions. And then I made sure to research what questions I wanted to ask as well and had 5 or so prepared for that.
Okay, so let me make sure we don't get too much in one bite. So you had written out 10 or 15 answers to commonly asked behavioral interview questions.
Exactly.
And I think the reward of people listening to this is I think I lifted some of your questions that came in front of me to put into my people skills class. So some of them should know exactly what's coming because they will have practiced them in class. So to create your questions to ask, and of course, hopefully everybody listening knows, if you get to the end and they say, do you have any questions? And you don't have any questions, you're probably finished. You must have a question. Yes. So how did you know what's a good question and how did you find your question?
I didn't want to do just the typical generic questions you hear a lot. And I really wanted to ask questions I was truly curious about, not just a question that sounded good. So I just thought about what do I want to get out of this company? Because just as much as they want you to be a fit for ISN, you want ISN to be a fit for you as well. So I knew a big thing for me is I really cared about the culture of the company. Was I going to enjoy the people I was working with, the atmosphere I'm working in, and just kind of looked at my goals and curiosities and framed it around that.
Okay. And that's great because when you're genuinely curious, that's the best thing. And I guess you can look through the website, read about them on, is it Glassdoor? Is that what it's called? Glassdoor?
Yep.
And just, until you find something that you're curious about. I don't want to put you on the spot and ask, what do you do if you're not curious? But I guess nobody listening to this would be not curious. So we don't have to worry about those people right now. Okay. So I think that's the screen. Now you're getting sent down to Dallas, and you gave us a little bit of introduction. It's this speed dating thing where you meet everybody for 8 minutes. What is and this is a tough question, what were you concentrating on in those 8 minutes to essentially be liked? Because that's what it came down to, right? You're talking to someone for 8 minutes, and at the end, they're like, do I like this person?
Right.
So what are you doing? And
first impression is definitely the biggest thing. You want to come off confident and knowledgeable and prepared. So I think right off the bat, questions and interviews, all kind of tend to fall into the same patterns and whatnot. So just giving them something unique to grasp on, give them specifics. So experiences you've had and specifically how you overcame challenges or met your goal. I think that's what they're really going to be looking for is your initial impression and then specific items you've achieved.
Okay. So when I was listening to your answer there, I'm like, okay, that's not it. Okay, that's not why they liked you. Those questions they asked you were a vehicle to see if they liked you. So let me ask you this. Where did your confidence come from? Because that's probably why they liked you, right? You were able to answer those questions. So had you had a lot of interviews? Were there things that you did in college that led you? Because you get down there, it's pretty scary. You got all those people. It's a big building in Dallas. All the other people are smart. Everybody's, well-dressed and well-mannered, and I mean, you can get psyched out rather easily. So where did your confidence come from?
I think it just came, it was a flowing process through college, right? Just putting myself out there and in front of other challenges, whether it's getting in leadership positions during college.
Sorry to interrupt, but tell me what were some of those? Because absolutely, putting yourself out there, that's what we try to get people to do in people skills. Could you tell some of the things you did in college that you consider putting yourself out there that helped you get this confidence?
Sure. So I was in Greek life. So I led one of our philanthropy events. And I had never put on or led an event by myself before. Of course, I had people helping me as well and working with me. But kind of starting from scratch there. Obviously, I've never done a philanthropy event. So learning out the ropes and just understanding what you're confident in and then what you're maybe not so confident in and working on those items. And then just through school and other organizations, continuing to volunteer. But really the leadership, I think, is going to be the key item. Making sure you can speak to people and that you're confident when doing so. That's what I found helped me the most.
So just because this is one of the big things we're trying to emphasize with people, because I think what people feel like is, they can study, then when they get to the interviews, they will figure out how to do it. But what I'm hearing you say is that the things you did all along the way in college essentially led to the confidence, and you didn't get psyched out. You could recall what you did at that philanthropy project as the leader to answer your behavioral interview questions. What other things proved to be big enough that you had behavioral interview answers coming from those activities?
Definitely prior work experience. And truthfully, I didn't have a job throughout all of college. I just had one previous internship. But I was able to apply a lot of the questions they asked me. I brought back to that previous experience and gave a specific example from. So I think that's huge to have something you can speak back to, work experience, and
okay,
that's the big one.
Okay, so you go through the speed dating thing for 8 minutes for 7 or 8 people. Then what happens?
So then you move on to the next portion of the interview, which is those presentations.
Okay.
So there's a set of 10 or so topics you could potentially receive. They'll give you your topic 5 minutes beforehand. You've got that 5 minutes to prepare, and then you need to go and present over that for about 5 minutes or so. So really what they're looking for there, I think they could care less what you actually say in the presentation. It's, can you present?
Right. So yeah, and that's what I was kind of saying about your questions, right? It was really, do you have confidence? How are you coming across? The questions are just something to do, a vehicle. So they give you a topic, you have 5 minutes to prepare, and I imagine the presentation goes back to not being nervous during and you're thinking to yourself, some part of your brain is thinking, oh my goodness, nobody likes to present. The whole thing is going to come down to, if I muff this, I'm not going to get it. So how many presentations did you give in college?
Oh, I can't even count. Tons.
Oh, good. And because it seems like you can get through college without giving very many. So how did you get so many?
Whether it was just through my sorority or in classes, I feel like in-class presentations or something I experienced, and really anywhere that you can get out and speak to a group of people, I mean, it counts. It doesn't have to be a formal PowerPoint presentation, Okay,
good. And that was it for, I guess, first round of interviews at their place.
Yep. So they fly you out there, which is great, and put you up in a hotel, and then you'll go through the interviews, and then everyone goes out to dinner and kind of relaxes a little bit and debriefs.
So you go out to dinner with people like candidates and people from ISN.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, everybody listening would know that is a huge part of the interview too. You're still being watched at dinner. They're still deciding if they like you. Some people put their guard down. This is a good one. What kind of things, well, wait, let's finish up how you got the job. Then we'll do looking at it from the other side, because I always get carried away. So, and is that the day they decide, or do you got to go back again?
So, well, actually, before that day, they bring you in just for a small reception. So it's just hors d'oeuvres and drinks. And just like you said, that's still a part of the interview, whether you know it or not. And then it's the second day we actually go into the speed dating interviews and presentations. And then from there, that's it.
And then
That's
they
the
hire you or
last.
don't hire you. So it's a
Exactly.
day and a half interview, and then they hire or don't hire you.
In addition to
Okay.
the on-campus interviews.
Yeah, and I think to summarize, we started by saying the things you learn in class don't necessarily directly relate to what you do, but all the experiences you had in class did relate. So the experiences are maybe more important than the content. Just like in your interview, it didn't matter what you talked about. It mattered if you were likable, you spoke well, had good body language, and so forth. And then you got picked. So now let's spend. I don't know I don't ever know how the time goes,
14.
but we'll talk a little bit about seeing it from the other side. So when you interview, what are some things that people do that derail the whole thing? So the kinds of things that are common mistakes that people make, that since you have so many choices, it's like, why do this one? Because I'm trying to throw people out of the thing to get down to what we need. So what do they do to muddle it up?
You definitely, I keep saying it and I'll say it again, first impression really is what matters. Within 5 seconds of the conversation, you can kind of gauge whether this is going to be someone you are interested in or who just isn't, let me start over. What did I start off saying?
So I'm saying it's a first impression. And what I was going to ask as a follow-up is like, what does that mean though? Because the poor people listening, I go, I don't know, what does it mean specifically to make a good impression?
Be confident and go in there knowing what you're talking about. And even if you don't necessarily know everything the business does, and you don't have to know, but have knowledge. Give some sort of conversation talking point that shows you're at least aware of what the company does and goals you may have for the company as well. I think we're looking for someone who is striving to meet their own goals, right? So you want to come into this job with promotion. I want a promotion in a year, or I want to work at such and such location down the road. Specifics that you can offer, and just being truly confident is what they're looking for.
Okay, so how about muddle up? So what do some people do to muddle it up?
We get a question of, so what do you guys do? And that'll muddle it pretty quick.
So then you're done. What do you do? You're done.
Or just even being quiet or shy, and it's not bad if you're quiet or shy, but just know at least how to carry yourself well if that's something you find you tend to go down that route.
Right. So I was very shy and socially awkward when I was young. So I had to, and I tell my students this so they will have heard it before, but I realized somewhere in college there's no money in being shy. So I forced myself into situation after situation after situation. And probably I had to do it 3 times as many times as you did it because it was slow to come to me. But I did it enough times. And of course, you fail, right? It's like, oh, I was shy. I mumbled. I didn't do it right. I didn't have confidence. But eventually you get it. So lack of confidence. What about clothes people wear? Does that matter?
It does. Just be professional, look presentable. Don't show up in jeans and tennis shoes. If you feel uncomfortable, if you think it may not work, it probably doesn't.
Okay, but I mean, if a male is wearing like khaki cotton pants that he took out of the dryer, that I mean, he's going to lose to the dress pants guy. Do you think or not?
I think that's a part of the first impression is what you're wearing and how you look. So I would definitely say go in there looking sharp. You don't need to show up in a 3-piece suit by any means, but just carry yourself, present yourself well.
Okay.
We wear jeans at ISN, so that's nice. But
okay, that was just you trying to recruit people because everyone likes to wear jeans. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else that you can think of about the process?
I think my big takeaway, and I feel probably a lot of college kids don't know what it is they want to do once they graduate. I didn't know what specific job or field I wanted to go in. So I just put myself out there. I saw the job and I applied for it because why not? And then just went in there with as much knowledge and confidence as I could, and I got it. I can't really tell you exactly why I did, and maybe someone else didn't, but apparently it worked. So just maybe you don't know what it is you do want to do, but I think you'll figure out along the way what it is you don't want to do. And from there, just apply yourself the best you can.
Okay, and to summarize from my point of view in people skills is the thing that we say about people skills is in our classes, we are not trying to put lipstick on a pig. Like we're not trying to tell some bonehead what to wear so he gets the job. what we're trying to do at the Eastin Center is we're trying to get hold of you during your very first semester of freshman year, and we're trying to help you develop into the kind of person who would be picked for whatever it is that you want to be. So I think the greatest thing that you talked about there was how active you were and how you got into leadership roles where you didn't necessarily know what you were doing. You presented many, many, many times, and all of those things, when your big chance came, you did a good job and you got picked.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this, I think, would be a big thing, and we'll ask Leah what you think. For your interviews, you really try to turn it into a conversation. So it's not just, especially those little 8-minute things, right? It's not they ask a question and you give an answer, but they ask a question, you answer, then maybe you give a question, and then you just start chatting back and forth. That gets you very quickly to the point. So people would want to come to ISN with how many questions do you think about maybe about ISN and work and about the other person?
Right. And I don't think there's even a limit you can put on it. I would say definitely come prepared, 10, 15 questions. And probably it's okay to ask questions of what it is specifically that they do at ISN, because you want to know what you're getting into before you take a job as well. So whether it's questions just about the business itself or where you want to end up and the process of getting there.
So you can ask the other person about their goals, what do they like about working there, right? And what challenges have they had, what kind of people seem to fit the best, what characteristics fit in. So you can ask questions about the person interviewing you, about the kind of people who work there, about the challenges. So because a lot of times I think when people are trying to think of their questions, they're very narrow. They look at the confusing website and say, well, what can I ask them about their company? You can look at company news. So they could look at, you probably have pictures of your Vegas party, and you could just say, wow. You could talk about the Vegas thing.
Right.
So anything you see on there can be the basis of a question.
Right. I think anything that genuinely sparks your interest is a good way to go. So do your research to find out what that may be, but you want to ask questions that you care about the answer to, not just one that necessarily sounds good.
Because you can tell when it's fake and when it's very, very prepared.
Exactly.
So if you're curious, it's not fake.
And it may not even be a question that you had pre-selected or written down, but just based off the conversation you have, being able to flow with that and pick and choose topics based off the discussions you're currently having is important.